What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Swirly Plays, and it is finally time for my favorite videos that I do all year round. It is our third annual Swirly Plays Game of the Year series of videos, we're just going to call it this year. So in the past, I did one in 2021, and I believe it was just a top 10 video of the whole top 10, all as one video, nice and clean. Last year, I realized I played exactly 20 games. So I did a 20 through 11 and then a 10 through 1 video. So 2 videos last year. We're gonna do a lot more of those this year. So this year I played 27 different brand new games that came out in 2023, which is insane. And that's not even counting, like I played some, like the first game in a series of sequels that I played that you guys will hear me talk about later on in this series. I played a lot of video games this year and it was really great. A lot of great games came out this year. So what today is going to be is kind of what my honorable mentions for the year are going to be, because I'm still going to ultimately have like a top 20, but I did rank all 27 games that I played this year. So this video is going to be 27 through 21. So like my bottom 7 games I like the least this year. And I'm also going to add in at the very end a couple games that to kind of like set expectations. There's a few games I just did not get around to this year that I really would have loved to have played. That I, time, money, whatever, mostly time, I just never got around to, that I'm sure would have made the top 20 or at least been in contention for it, but I just, like I said, never got around to it. So 27 through 21 are runner-ups, and at the very end, some games I wish I would have got to this year. So let me know down in the comments, have you played any of these games? Do you think it's crazy that some of these didn't even make my top 20? Did you like them more? Did you like them less? What games did you not get to this year? I would love to hear about it in the comments. And without further ado, let's get into it. I'm a huge fan of board games, and the game that my then girlfriend and now wife Tiff showed me that got me into them was Settlers of Catan. Hardcore board game lovers tend to look down on Catan a bit, but I love it. When I saw they were making a version of Catan I could play on my PS5, I didn't expect anything groundbreaking, but I was excited to try it. Like most board game adaptations into video games, including a future entry on this list, it's just not the same as playing in person, rolling real dice, making real trade offers against your friends or family, and really getting mad when no one will just trade you a goddamn brick so you can finally build a road. I played this for about an hour or so when I realized I just needed to stick to the way it was intended to play it instead. I was a day 1 player of Destiny 2, and I was an everyday player for months at launch. I had fallen off for a while because it's so hard to jump back in once you've missed out on content. Plus, the parts of the game I had loved before had even been removed while Bungie made room for the new content. Josh from Adjective Noun Gaming and I decided we'd jump back in with the new expansion, Lightfall, that came out this year. It's still Destiny, it feels amazing to play, the guns are all so good, and the monsters you're fighting are fun. We never got back into it after that one night we played it and sort of just drifted off into space for me, waiting for the day I decided to jump back in. That day isn't today. Much like Destiny 2, I used to be absolutely obsessed with the Assassin's Creed franchise. I remember when I got my 360, one of the first games I played was the first Assassin's Creed that I borrowed from my cousin Nick. I was hooked right away, especially with the Ezio games. Black Flag was my favorite, but Unity was when I completely dropped off of the series. When Assassin's Creed Mirage was announced as a classic take on the Assassin's Creed formula, I was so pumped. Unfortunately, something about this game just feels off. Every moment feels so slow and clunky, the desert areas of Baghdad just all blend together, and I hope it's a problem with just this game, and that not in today's standard those games I love won't hold up if I ever go back to them someday. One of the perks of having a PlayStation Plus Premium account this year was that I got to try out Humanity at no additional cost. A fun puzzle game, Humanity involved leading a group of mannequins essentially through a path to a goal. Simple concept that grows and grows into some very complicated puzzles apparently. I dabbled in this game during a time of the year with a lot of other big games around that I didn't get to play as much of this game as I would have liked, but I really enjoyed my time with it. Now, I know this is very low on my list and would be very easy to be part of the cult of people going out of their way to hate on this game more than they would other games. I don't want to do that. I just thought Starfield wasn't a game for me. That's more of a Bethesda issue than this game specifically, however. Even games that have been more critically loved like Skyrim and Fallout didn't really click with me either. I played one 4-hour session of Starfield the week it came out, and in those 4 hours, I did have a blast playing a mission involving an alien monster on the loose, and you have to get to some generators to turn on the defense system. It was genuinely thrilling, and if there was more missions like that, I'm sure I would like those parts of this game. General Bethesda RPG formula just isn't for me, and I'm happy for those who love it. I'd never played a Metroid game before, so when Nintendo Shadow dropped a remaster of the first Metroid Prime, I was shocked but pumped to try it out. My first few hours I really enjoyed. When I realized how much backtracking and remembering of what paths were blocked by what power-ups I would eventually get that I would be doing, I fell off pretty quickly. This is the first disappointment on my list this year for me. I really was hoping this could be a top 10 contender for me this year, but I just don't like games like this, it turns out. Our first game on the list that could have ended up higher if I had started playing it sooner is Chia, a beautiful island exploration game that actually has more elements similar to Breath of the Wild than you'd think. This game is inspired by the island of New Caledonia, which is near Australia and New Zealand. It is just absolutely bursting with charm and character, carefully crafted by just 12 people at Awakad. I might be saying that wrong. I started this game just a week ago as I write the script, and I'm sure it would have cracked my top 15 if I had been able to play it more. In a stacked 2023, this is so impressive from a game made by so few people. There are my honorable mentions for 2023. Most of them were just, I didn't play it a whole lot, or they were kind of like meh. Not really a ton that I was like, I hate this game, to be honest with you, which shows how great of a year it was this year, that I didn't play any true duds this year. They're just mostly stuff that didn't click with me. Okay, so I have 4 games that I really planned on playing that I did not play, that I kind of wanted to give, like, even further honorable mention. Just a mention, I guess. So the first big one is Pikmin 4. I never really had any interest in it when it came out. I believe it was this summer. But I've just heard so many great things about that game, about how fun and charming and like satisfying the loop is of playing them. I've never played a Pikmin game before, but I feel like that's the one for me to pick up at some point. And especially people with kids, a lot of great stuff out there for Pikmin 4 that I guarantee would have been a top 15 at least if I would have played that this year. The other big one, and Josh, I'm sorry, I just didn't get around to it by the time I needed to record these videos, is Dave the Diver. I just ran out of time, and I picked a couple smaller games that I was able to finish like in one sitting versus playing Dave the Diver, because it ended up being like, from what I looked up, it's like a 25-hour game. Like, it's pretty beefy. And by the time December rolled around, like, I'm already so late on making these videos that I just didn't have the time to dive into that one. But I really want to. It's a fun, it's like 2D Subnautica, I've heard it described as. Like, you go down and do a bunch of fishing, but then you also run a restaurant, and like the game just kind of keeps building on what it like has to offer and different activities. It looks awesome. Heard great things about it. Just did not get to play it this year. The next two might be more under the radar. The first one is Chance of Sonar. It is a puzzle game where you are like learning a language that's baked into the game, but the way you learn them is a lot of like intricate puzzles. It's got a lot of really cool, smart like design, and like the art style just looks really cool. It's just like a wild game that like makes you think as a way to like lead you by example. Like, it just like clues in the environments and stuff kind of leads you along. I love that stuff when it's not just here's a waypoint, go there. Like, I like that when it comes to puzzle games. And apparently it's really good. Giant Bomb rated it very highly. I've heard a lot of great things. Again, just ran out of time. And the last one I haven't heard anybody else really talk about, but it's actually Palia. I think it's Palia. Shout out to my brother Brandon. He had told me about this game. It's like a farming sim that I believe is now on Switch, but it was on PC as well, and I think it's in early access, so I think it's free actually too. I have it downloaded on my PC. We just never got around to playing it. We were supposed to play it for a stream. Again, just kind of got away from us, but those are my 4 mentions, we'll just call them, of things I didn't get to play this year, but I really wish I would have. Hello everybody, we are here finally into our top 20 games of the year of our Lord 2023. We have made it. I'm not gonna waste any time. Like I said in previous videos, 1 game a day, at least per video, how we're gonna do this. So we're gonna kick off our top 20 with a game that I actually only played 1 time this year, but I did play it on stream with Josh from Adjective Down Gaming. Shout out to him. And we had a lot of fun playing it, even if it was only that 1 time. And that game is Moving Out 2. I had never played the first game, but they made a wonderfully goofy and fun game to play with friends, especially if you can all be in the same room. It's a perfect throwback to the couch co-op games that most of us grew up playing. It's just good old-fashioned fun, and even though I only played it for 1 stream, I know this game will be in my mind for a long time if ever given the chance to play a fun game in a group setting, especially with people who might not even be into games normally. The concept is simple. Move all the furniture in the level from one place to another. Sometimes it's moving them out of a building, sometimes it's moving animals into their proper pens. No matter the objective, seeing how destructible the environments are and how much of a mess you can't help but make made me laugh every single time. It's an instant classic and a must-own for anyone who enjoys party games. I picked up Venba during my usual cramming at the end of the year to jump into as many of the smaller indie titles I've missed throughout the year as I can. I'm so glad I decided to play this game on a recent Sunday morning. The whole game only took me 2 hours to play, but it's such a treat. It tells the story of an Indian family who moved to Canada to start a new life. One where they could start a family and give a life to their child that they could only have dreamed of. You see pieces of their life through cooking of classic Indian dishes. It's easy to look at this game and think, oh, it's basically Cooking Mama, which it kind of is with the cooking side of things, but the other half of it is actually a really charming look at how tough it can be sometimes to be an immigrant family, and how food is something that all of us can relate to help us get through the bad times. I can't ever know what it's like to be an immigrant in a new country, or a parent trying to come to terms with their child not wanting to be part of the traditions of my culture. But they do such a great job of making you feel for Venba and her family, see their struggles, and how food is used to bring them together. It's a beautiful game in every sense of the word, and especially given the short run time and low price of the game, I highly recommend it to everyone. Every year it feels like there's this game that is just given way too much hate than it really deserves a lot of time. Like, for whatever reason, it's just some game gets like dogpiled on. For a lot of people this year, it was Starfield, which understandable. For me, actually, it was Forspoken. This game went viral during its early review stages back in January, and the internet really rolled with it. To be fair, it's a little rough, the dialogue is pretty bad, the voice acting is worse, and it's got a healthy layer of cheese all over most of it. But plenty of very fun games don't have amazing dialogue or voice acting though. The core of this game is in the gameplay. It's a third-person action game with a very unique combat system that is a flashy spectacle on the screen. It's a classic open-world game with roaming enemies and icons to clear off a map. Again, another thing that to some people is an immediate non-starter. For me, when I was playing this game, it filled that like podcast / I'm watching YouTube videos while I'm playing something game. Like, it's just a good, ignore all the crap that is objectively kind of bad in this game and just have fun flying around the world, fighting stuff, climbing over stuff. It has a place for that for the right price, for sure. I put a solid 25 hours into this game and really enjoyed my time exploring the world and upgrading my elemental powers. I only got far enough to have the earth and fire powers unlocked, but the flow state that combat becomes with switching between elements, dashing around the field, blowing things up in a spark of colors and flashes, it's just a great time, and I really hope more people are willing to give it a chance. As the price drops and we get farther away from what everyone remembers from those few unfortunate viral clips that doomed this game to a lot of people before it had a chance to surprise them, I really hope Forspoken can have a little bit of a comeback story eventually. Anyone who's been following me on YouTube ever since I started making videos, shout out to you 3 or 4 legends out there, you all know that I started making videos on Swirly Games, actually, making MLB The Show content. I spent literally countless hours playing MLB 16 through 21 when I realized I wasn't liking as much as I used to. But more importantly, I wasn't playing very many other games beyond MLB The Show. I took MLB 22 as a break, and I'm so glad that I did. I absolutely wouldn't have played 20 new games last year if I had played MLB for 800 hours like I had been every other year. But MLB 23 looked really promising from what they showed ahead of the game launching, and I started to get the itch again. I decided this year I would give it a shot, but not let it take over my life again like before. Luckily, the game was fun for a while, and I still played 250 hours of it, by far the most I played a game this year. But the systems they put into the game made it so easy for me to have a falling off point. I get hit with FOMO when it comes to Diamond Dynasty and MLB The Show so much that it's a genuine problem. Every new batch of cards, I had to keep my collection up to date, and it turns into needing to play so much to stay current before certain cards would go away. MLB 23 introduced a system called sets that basically made each new set a point where you had to completely start over. By the time set 3 came out, none of the cards you had spent, say, 250 hours working to get from set 1 could be used in online or current content anymore. They wanted to keep lineups fresh, and I understand why, but for me, someone who wants to collect the cards and build fun teams, I couldn't do that with this system. So by July, I had reached a natural stopping point in my MLB The Show 23 comeback, and I'm honestly okay with that. I enjoyed getting to play a baseball game again. A year-long break was what I needed to feel excited about playing again. I don't know if sets will make a return, at least in their current state, because the community really hasn't liked how they've done it for similar reasons to what I've just said. I'm sure I'll be excited to check in on what fun new features they will add to 24, because they always do. The game is still like fundamentally very fun to play. It always has been because it's baseball. It's a good baseball game. It's the best you can get for just the pure gameplay aspect of everything. But to play Diamond Dynasty like I like to play, it's almost like you're choosing, do I want to play MLB The Show or do I want to play literally anything else? And I think I'm at the point in my life and with gaming in general that I'm never going to pick the one over everything. And that's fine. I played way too much of this game to say I didn't like it because I did enjoy my time, but it's just not really the game for me anymore, and that's fine. Earlier in the countdown, I mentioned that there would be another board game adaptation coming up on the list, and we're at that point right now. We're about to talk about Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is a board game, but it's really a campaign game in the same vein as having a D&D group to play with. It's a choose-your-own-adventure game with RPG elements, deck building, strategy, you name it, it's in Gloomhaven. You play as a group of 2 to 4 mercenaries that are hired to do different jobs that lead down a road to many more adventures. The gameplay is so fulfilling. You have a handful of cards that on each turn, you play 2 of them, each with a top and bottom action and an initiative score. Once all players have declared their initiative, a monster card with actions and initiative as well are drawn, and play proceeds lowest to highest based on initiative. Fun comes into play when the different classes synchronize so well together, it can make a seemingly impossible scenario become trivial in just a few turns. It is so satisfying when you're playing with friends and not by yourself. Much like Catan, Gloomhaven is never going to hold a candle to playing the real board game with other people. However, I played much more of this than I did Catan, about 15 hours or so. Gloomhaven is a very complicated game that is hard to get a grasp on because to play it, it takes a dedicated group meeting up often and having at least 6 hours to play it to make it worth it, in my opinion. So learning how to get better and more comfortable with your class can be tough. But this game was a great way to practice not only my class, but those of the rest of my party. Shout out to Nick and Austin, who I play Gloomhaven with whenever we're able to get a chance. When I played this game, I made a party with the Mind Thief that I was playing, the Cragheart, I believe it's called, that Austin plays, and the, oh boy, whatever the Spellweaver that Nick plays. And that actually helped me the next time we played together because I knew what you guys were doing better. So it had a good purpose for me. I really enjoyed my time. With Gloomhaven being a really hard game to get into with how expensive it is and finding a group willing to play and how tough it can be as adults to just find time to play together with people, this game actually is a great alternative to help scratch that Gloomhaven itch, and can be a great practice tool in between sessions too. Gloomhaven was a great experience for me this year, both on the table and on the TV. One of my first gaming memories ever is when we moved into the house that my parents still live in today when I was 5, and playing in the basement Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES while my parents were finishing moving with everything else. It's kind of a shock with how much I played that game because I eventually got it on my Game Boy Advance in like 5th or 6th grade, I want to say, that I didn't really grow up to be like a huge 2D platformer or even like a Mario specifically like fan at all. Even without having that soft spot with Mario going into it, I actually really had a great time playing Super Mario Wonder this year. Super Mario Wonder is 2D Mario at its absolute best, and you don't even need to take me, a casual fan's word for it. Countless members of Games Media that I follow have said the same. People whose favorite games are Mario games have Wonder up there with the pillars of the franchise, especially for a 2D entry. The gimmick of this entry is that each level has a Wonder Flower to find that completely alters the level in a fun and unique way. Some are more impactful than others, but some of them feel like you are playing a different game almost. It could be a top-down game, or a musical will just burst onto the screen. There are dozens of levels in this game, and each one is wonderfully crafted without the flowers, but also have the Wonder Flower that totally changes up the game in fun ways. It got to the point where I was a few dozen levels in, I just keep waiting for a flower to do something that I've basically seen already, but it just never really happened. The game kept surprising me as I played it, and in my 15 hours to beat the game, I got at least the Wonder Seed collectibles in the levels you get for finishing the level, and the one you have to find while the Wonder Flowers are active in every level in the game. I started to try and find all of the seeds, but when a very early one stumped me and a guide video showed it in a very obscure place I never would have thought to check, I decided this wasn't the game I needed to 100%. I can beat all the levels, find the one extra collectible in each level, I'm content with that. Also, huge shout out to my brother Brandon for playing it during our Extra Life stream in the wee hours of the night. The multiplayer actually is really fun, even if in split screen it does that thing where the camera follows one specific person. It's still like a really fun experience in multiplayer, and from what I've heard, it seems to be even better when you're playing online. The multiplayer is so seamless and maybe the best implementation of multiplayer in any Nintendo game ever made, let alone a Mario game. If you have a friend or brother, in my case, around to play the game with at 3 AM during a 28-hour charity stream, then this is the Mario game for you. Following up a brand new Mario game, I absolutely adored playing Super Mario RPG this year. I had always known about this game as that one weird SNES Mario game that has turn-based combat and thinking how wild that was, especially considering Square, now Square Enix, was the one who developed this game. Shout out to the Wizard and the Bruiser podcast. They did a full episode on Super Mario RPG about the remake and the original one, and I learned a ton of stuff from that. Definitely should check that out if you're interested. This game really had a surprisingly underground following. It released right before the N64 came out, and Mario 64 absolutely changed the game forever. But once the internet and video game blogs became more available, people started to realize how much they loved this game, and it's always been one of those franchises that Nintendo could maybe bring back one day, but it would be unlikely. Well, this remaster that got announced this summer was their way to bring it to modern consoles, and it was a joy to play. This game was a lot of people's first RPG game, and it's perfect for that. The art style is of course full of that gorgeous Nintendo charm. It also kept the same active input combat that inspired tons of future RPGs, including one we will see later on this list. It's not just menu simulator where you have to choose between attack, item, or magic. Each character and each of those characters' attacks have a timing mechanic where if you can press A at the perfect time, you'll do extra damage. Defending works the same way. All enemy attacks that can be blocked have a window where if you time when you press A, you can take less or even no damage from the attack. It doesn't sound like much in practice, you're just pressing literally one extra button, but it's hard to describe how much more engaging that makes combat. There's so much optimizing you can do by mastering that timing, and it can make an already forgiving game in terms of difficulty a breeze, but in a way that makes it feel like it's because of how good you are versus the game just being easy. The story is exactly what you would expect in a Mario RPG. That bad guy has stolen a bunch of stars and you need to travel around the world collecting them. The twist, however, is that Bowser isn't the bad guy. It's Smithy, who creates these animated weapons that are taking over the Mushroom Kingdom. Bowser, in fact, ends up joining the team, and getting to play with Bowser versus against him was a unique concept at the time when this game originally came out. Super Mario RPG is just a perfect little RPG that might have been a little bit too simple to get any higher up on my list, but if I was a dad who had a kid that wanted to get into RPGs, I could not imagine a better game to be someone's first RPG than Super Mario RPG. So it is a wonderful time. I highly recommend it. At this point in the list, we are making a pretty big jump from the previous game and how much I love the rest of these games. We are solidly in top 10 contenders, and I honestly cannot believe that I ended the year with Dredge at only 13 on my list. Our first game on the countdown that is one of the games I played entirely on Twitch this year, Dredge is what could feel like a cute and cozy fishing game that has a coat of Cthulhu paint splattered on top of it, but it keeps all of the charm. This is a shorter indie title, but they find a way to put so much game into Dredge that it feels like it has much more to offer than what seems apparent at first. The basic idea is that you are a new fisherman in this area of small islands, and the previous fisherman seems to have disappeared. You go out, catch fish, and bring those fish back to other people who have specific requests, or you can sell them to buy upgrades for your ship. You can make a bigger ship to fit more fish, a fast one to cover more ground in a day, or buy different equipment that help you catch new fish from new areas that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. The catch, pun intended, of Dredge is that once the sun goes down, things get a little bit spooky. You start to hallucinate and dangers come out of the water that aren't there during the daytime that can potentially destroy your ship. If you take damage, your boat loses whatever was in those certain spaces in your ship, and after so many hits, you're sunk. That's another thing. This game has an inventory management system that is also very satisfying. Each fish is a different shape, and trying to optimize as much shape as you can feels so good, and very much inspired by a game that will appear on this list later. Dredge has a gameplay loop that is so addicting, it really scratches that, okay, just one more day, or okay, one more mission because I can do it in 5 minutes itch that makes it hard to put down once you start, especially when you decide to play it only on stream once a week. That's become a great testament of a game this year, where if I started playing it on stream and it ends up being only once a week, and I'm almost mad that I picked it as a stream game because I just want to play it constantly, but I'm playing it all on stream only. Dredge is one of the big reasons why that kind of became a thing for me this year, of streaming games I wanted to play all the time. Most recent game that I played this year that I finished is here at the 12 spot, Cocoon. Made from some of the people who made Limbo and Inside at their new studio, Geometric Interactive, I had heard some great things about Cocoon from Giant Bomb and other podcasts. But when it won for the best debut indie at the Game Awards, I decided I had to give it a shot. I'm so glad that I did. Cocoon is a puzzle game at its simplest, but it's a brilliant one at its strongest. To me, a great puzzle game is one that constantly makes me feel like I'm a genius just by playing the game. Just that drip feed of like every 30 seconds, I'm like, oh, that was a great idea. Oh, that was a great idea. And this game is perfect at that, with basically no tutorials, no dialogue, nothing. It's just you see the game, you can tell what they want you to do, and then they give you the ability to make the calls on your own and figure it out. It is so good at that. The game is only 6 hours long and a very easy and fun platinum trophy to get. But every 5 to 10 minutes, I was getting flooded with dopamine, feeling I was playing 5D chess and could see the future just from solving these puzzles. It all involves these orbs you carry around that, after beating the boss for each orb, gives you a traversal related ability to use in future puzzles. The cool part is you have to go inside the orbs to fight the boss and to solve future puzzles. For example, you start with just the orange orb. After beating the boss inside it, you can then carry the orange orb to make these crystalline bridges appear to help you explore new areas. You then find the green orb, and then you, along with the orange orb, go inside the green orb to solve puzzles in there, some of which involve that orange orb power. Then the green orb's boss makes it so you can use green orb's power to basically travel up or down these rock pillars that change from going up or down as you use them. The game continues this way until you have 4 orbs by the end, and the level of orbception to some of the other puzzles is so well made. Taking an orb, into an orb, into an orb, into another orb, and back out again just to set up one small puzzle piece on a level is so cool. There might only be one other game on this list that makes you feel as smart as Cocoon made me feel this year. If you like puzzle games with really fun art styles, give Cocoon a shot for sure. At the beginning of 2023, I almost made a video talking about my most anticipated games that were going to come out in 2023, and by far the game I was the most hyped for this year was Diablo 4. So the fact that it's not even in my top 10 and just missed it at the number 11 spot would probably make you think, oh, it must have been a disappointment to me this year, which isn't the entire story. This is more about how great of a year 2023 ended up being versus Diablo 4 not really being a great game. Both are true in some aspects, but we'll get into that. My third favorite game of all time is Diablo 3. The amount of hours and literal blood, sweat, and tears I put into that game are probably only matched by World of Warcraft and MLB The Show for me. I played that game on PC, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PS4. I played with tons of different people and I loved every bit of that game. So a bigger and seemingly better version of Diablo coming out this year was guaranteed to be the best game I would play all year, right? This sounds way more down than I want it to be. Tiff and I leveled a character together through the campaign and had an awesome time with it. This game looks beautiful, the open world format really works, and our classes were a ton of fun to play and come up with cool builds. Gameplay wise, it's Diablo 3 but better, and that's really the most important aspect of a good Diablo game. I just found that after Tiff fell off the game a bit when we beat the story, which really is when a game like this starts because of how gearing and endgame content works, I just didn't have as much desire to keep playing. I did create a Season 1 character, and honestly I've never really liked seasonal Diablo content. I never finished my first character, so I definitely didn't really want to have to start over on a new one. But I tried out and had a few fun sessions. It's just not for me. However, if Tiff came up to me and was like, let's play Diablo again, I would be all about it. The gameplay loop is so fun, the loot system works for me, and we had a blast with this game. I honestly think it's a good thing that Diablo didn't take over my life this year. Way too many other great games came out that I would have missed for the sake of playing more of this game. Diablo 4 is going to be a game that I keep coming back to for years, especially as new content and a new DLC comes out eventually. Almost like WoW, it's a forever game for me, where games I've loved and have ranked higher on my list, I'm not sure I would ever come back to even if I technically like them more. There will be a time where there's a nice gap in other new releases where I get that Diablo itch again, and I guarantee I will have a blast, and probably wonder if I ranked it a little too low on this list. Diablo 4, from the moment it released, was kind of my bar for if a game was in the top 10 or not. And I don't think there's ever been a better number 11 game of any year than Diablo 4 in 2023. We have finally made it. The top 10, not just any top 10, maybe the top 10 of the single greatest year in the history of video game releases. It's kind of a big deal. The number of times my list this year has changed multiple times with every game that came out. I'd move it, think about it, and move somebody up. Maybe somebody moved down, or you know what? I thought more about this one. I got to move it back up. It became countless if I would have kept track. My number 10 is one of the first new games that came out this year that I played. And it was also the first game I streamed of a new type of game that was completely foreign to me going into 2023, horror games. The remake of Dead Space, a game that I had obviously never played in its original version, is really truly responsible for me having an entire new genre of games that I actually love and will be looking forward to in the future. Remakes and remasters are interesting in me in terms of if I choose to count them on my list each year. For example, I wouldn't have counted The Last of Us Part 1 remake if I actually played it last year and not in January this year, because it wasn't different enough in the actual gameplay. I'd already played the original multiple times. So Dead Space I can see to some not being new enough, but for me, it was maybe the most new a game has ever been, with it being my first dive into a survival horror game. Emphasis on the horror part, and my stream scare counter of 40 during this game. Twitch.tv/SwirlyStreams since we're here, quick plug. A lot has changed in this game compared to the first as I understand, and most of them being the best types of changes remakes and remasters can make. Quality of life ones. They changed the map of the ship to make all of it accessible at all times, as well as adding the quest objective line to show you where you need to go next. The game is just a bloody mess of absolute nightmare fuel, and I could not believe how much fun I was having while playing it. I really think streaming it helped me get through it. Horror, in the little I have experienced it in my life, is best in a group setting to either share in it together or laugh at me being genuinely way too scared of most things. We've talked a lot about the idea of Dead Space and why it means a lot to me now, as a well-rounded gamer as far as my interests go. What about the game made it worthy of a top 10 spot this year? The combat is so much fun. Just blasting limbs off of these horrible alien monsters to be able to weaken them is such a smart choice. In these types of games / media in general, limbs flying off of the monsters are always fun, and that's both the most fun way to handle the situations in this game, but also the most effective too. The best strategy to use in this game is to shoot the legs off of an enemy, walk over to it, and stomp its head in to save ammo. Which, by the way, the stomp in this game is so good. Again, both fun and smart in terms of how to play the game best, and that's a perfect combination that is actually more rare to find in games than it should be. The alien monsters in this game get to be so grotesque, and even the simplest of enemies never lose that fear factor they bring to you. Resources, including health, are so hard to come by and almost to its detriment at its most extreme. And every bullet or hit you take can mean the difference of life and death. I think it's my one complaint with this game. There were a few times where I did feel like my resources were so low that I really struggled getting my stores built back up. To go explore any chest meant I would have to fight more, using those resources up. You never fully are out, and I never hit a wall of just not having enough stuff on me to get through an encounter. So maybe that's actually perfect game design. But in the moment, it did bother me a few times, but again, maybe 10% of the 15 hours I spent in this game were spent reminiscing and looking back on the good old days of actually having plasma cutter rounds to spare. But that wasn't enough to make me not love this game and feel it was very deserving of a spot in my top 10 this year. Dead Space is survival horror in its truest form. An all-time classic made better by a remake that a lot of people didn't really think it needed in the first place, but I'm super glad that they chose to do it. Dead Space is a must-own, in my opinion, for anybody who loves survival horror, but honestly, I'm the best case for this, even if you don't like it. Maybe it's the one that gets you into it just like it did for me. I just hope this leads to EA making the second and third, and hopefully even a brand new Dead Space for me to get super excited about in the future as well. Ooh. Oh my god! Okay. We're at the point now at number 9 where we are hitting my second highest ranked game that I actually have not finished at the time of writing the script. I'm hoping I have that done by the time I sit down to record this, but as of writing, I'm about 70% through Alan Wake 2, and I can't even imagine it going any lower than this, and maybe even higher ultimately. A brief history with me and Remedy games. Before this year, I had only ever played Control, but I thought it was incredible. I hadn't started making Game of the Year videos yet at the time, but in 2020, it would have been my number 2 game behind Hades for sure. I never played Quantum Break or the Max Payne games, and I'd never played Alan Wake until this game got announced, and because of me having played Dead Space, I'm suddenly into survival horror games now. By the way, Dead Space is going to get a lot of compliments on this list, mostly because a lot of the games, because I played Dead Space first, I couldn't have even played Alan Wake 2 if I wouldn't have played Dead Space first, so I might like Alan Wake 2 more, and that's why it's higher on the list, but I truly owe so much to Dead Space being good and how much I liked it to even make it possible for me to play this game. I decided to stream the first game leading up to the release of the sequel, and I'm so glad I did. First game is so unique and maybe more so in both story and combat design of any game I'd ever played. The combat in the second game is better but less original, but the story being batshit insane is still there, and I care about that more anyways. I'm not even going to begin to describe what is happening in the story of these games, but instead we'll share the general concept that, as I said, I think is one of the coolest and smartest ideas in games today. Alan Wake is an author of true crime novels who finds himself slipping into an alternate reality called the Dark Place, which is controlled by a mysterious entity called the Dark Presence. The Dark Place is where works of fiction, like say novels, can be made into reality, and the darker the better for the Dark Presence. The events of the first game have Alan's wife, Alice, disappearing into the Dark Place through Cauldron Lake, and he eventually is able to save her by writing a story where they trade places, and he is trapped in the Dark Place for 13 years, leading into the events of Alan Wake 2. So Alan, along with Saga in the sequel, need to write a new story that is both dark enough to make the Dark Place happy, but also has a happy ending where they win and Alan can get out. The idea of works of art being made real with malice behind the intentions is such a wild idea that truly isn't matched by anyone else out there. The gameplay loop in the sequel is played between two characters, Saga Anderson, an FBI agent investigating the same place that Alan Wake disappeared from in the first game, and Alan Wake himself. Saga is leaning more into the solving a case end of things, gathering clues to put in her mind place to help her solve the mystery of what exactly is going on. She's also much better in combat, with more gun options. When playing as Alan, however, you are basically storyboarding parts of the novel he is editing to make sure he can get out of the Dark Place for good. So this gameplay involves more going into different locations, and instead of looking for clues, you are discovering new plot elements and story hooks that can be used to manipulate the environment around you. The basic concept of both is the same: discover information and kind of tell a story. But Saga is uncovering one, while Alan is creating one. It's so smart, and both characters feel so well rooted in what they're doing through world building and just how well realized everything about these games are from Remedy. Its biggest strength is also my only real problem with the game. Sometimes this openness is hard to follow, and I have had some parts where I just had no idea what the game wanted me to do next, and those spots were pretty frustrating. But the more I play, the less of an issue that is, so if someone doesn't like dwelling on the negatives in games, it's absolutely worth mentioning because I know I'm not alone here. But it does get better if anyone out there is worried about that and has been experiencing the same thing in the early hours of the game. This game is also maybe the scariest thing I have ever played. It's terrifying in how foreboding it is. The music they use just hits home in a way that you can play a sequence where ultimately nothing happens, but the music during those segments make you feel convinced something is about to happen, and it doesn't. That level of never being able to predict what's coming or get used to how a certain type of scare is used just makes the entire game, every single second of it, become just drenched in this anxiousness that makes you really feel immersed in what horrible times the characters are having. As a new fan of survival horror, immersion is absolutely the key to these games being effective. I'm not sure if a game more immersive than Alan Wake 2 has ever been made, let alone this year. So since I wrote that first part of the script, I have in fact beat Alan Wake 2, thankfully. I even got the Platinum Trophy in it, which I did not expect or plan on doing going into it. Honestly, the more and more I've thought about it too, I think this is maybe the most proud of a Platinum Trophy I've ever been in my entire life. As I said during Dead Space entry, I never thought I would play a survival horror game, let alone multiple of them, and this platinum felt like an honorary platinum for Dead Space and a future game on this list. It sounds corny, but I have actually conquered some real fears of mine this year in gaming. I'm actually very proud of myself. I think it's important to get out of our comfort zones every once in a while and face things head on in a safe environment if you can. And streaming these games and getting the platinum on stream felt like the perfect end to my 2023 of games. Speaking of the ending, very briefly, the ending is just as weird and potentially confusing, but open-ended as much as the rest of the game. The upcoming DLCs I'm sure will give more questions and answers, but in games as rich and deep as Alan Wake 2, I think that's a good thing. It's almost more fun to experience and talk about this game as it is to play it, and I think it's going to be one of the more memorable games I will ever play. Now that I ended up beating Alan Wake 2, I only have one game left on my list where I hadn't actually beat it yet. But I think more than any other game, I deserve a pass on this one. It's such a massive game that I've already put over 100 hours into it. And the craziest part is after 100 hours, I'm maybe 40% through the game on my farthest save file. My number 8 this year easily would have been a top 5 game if I would have finished it, but in a year with so many great games that I did end up finishing, whether they were shorter or not, I wanted to put a light on that and shine to those games that I got the entire 100% experience from. But let's talk about Baldur's Gate 3. Where do you even begin when talking about the most elaborate, in-depth, and beautifully crafted CRPG of all time? Baldur's Gate 3 is literally Dungeons & Dragons in video game form. If you consider a dungeon master's mind technically counting as near infinite possibilities, and this game turned that infinite mind into actual choices to be made in this game. There are literally thousands of possible outcomes to most of this game, and you will literally never meet anyone else who played the same game as you. And the best part, all of these infinite outcomes are all amazing to play. I want to get my gripes out of the way. My wife Tiff and I played this game together for most of my time with it. We both obviously had our favorite characters that we wanted to romance. Shadowheart for her, and Karlach, obviously have you seen her? For me. Most of the romance options are very clear. These characters are so well fleshed out, and just like with talking with people in real life, you learn what they like, what they don't, what decisions they will agree with, and which ones are deal breakers for them. Shadowheart is a different story. We spent countless hours trying to get Shadowheart to romance Tiff, to the point of us actually downloading a cheat engine to raise her affection levels, because even with starting over and playing 40 hours, and every decision being made with her needing to like Tiff's character in mind, it just wasn't working. What made it even worse was other characters, who we weren't even talking to at all, were showing interest in my character, and Shadowheart was having nothing to do with what Tiff was doing. I'm convinced it was some bug, or the game is just so massive, there is no set list of, do this to get this exact outcome. But yeah, unbelievably frustrating. It also uses D&D combat, so dice rolls can be pretty streaky in the negative way, making some combat encounters way harder than they should be. But that's also how real D&D works, so it's hard to fault it here. Dice gonna roll what dice gonna roll. Okay, now the positives. Holy shit, this game is so big. I have never seen a game with more things to explore, more people to meet, that are all absolutely worth doing, as well as potentially game altering. You could potentially not meet a certain character, and not meeting them could change dozens of hours or even make them impossible and essentially removed from your playthrough. It's the greatest D&D campaign ever made, and it's literally limitless and never ending in terms of trying to see everything. It's the D&D sandbox game we've all been dreaming of, and it's perfectly executed. Our latest game that Tiff and I are playing has me playing a paladin, and Tiff is a sorcerer, with our girl Shadowheart being a cleric and Karlach being a barbarian, of course. But there are 5 or 6 other NPCs that can make up your party if you want, that are all wonderfully voice acted, including a special shout out to Neil Newbond's work as Asterion that won him the Game Award for Best Performance. All of these NPCs have dozens of hours of content dedicated to each of them, if you want to pursue them. Or you could be like Tiff and I and feed Gale his stupid magic items so he will just shut up about his stupid stomach ache already. I'm trying to flirt with Karlach here, dude. Like, can you chill over there? Keep it down? Other than our romance issues and streaky dice rolls, I can't think of anything in this potentially hundreds of hours long game that isn't perfect. It's incredible that this game even exists, and I truly mean that. It's such a great representation of what the perfect D&D game can be, and as someone who's played D&D for most of my life, it still impresses me how well they nailed it. And it's not just in the story where these options are either. Encounters and choosing to deal with enemies violently or through trickery or talking your way out of it, all of it can work if you plan right and maybe get lucky with some dice rolls. But the best part is if the dice betray you, then something else that's also amazing and entertaining will happen instead, and you can just get lost in what they're doing with this game. Baldur's Gate 3, I think more than any other game, is the best game of all time of so many different things. It's the best CRPG of all time. It's the best D&D adaptation of all time. It's arguably one of the best fantasy games in general of all time. It's the best choose your own adventure game of all time. It's a bona fide all-time classic that, much like how Breath of the Wild was back in the day, the next 10 years are going to be developers trying to figure out how to make their own Baldur's Gate 3. And I feel like that really counts for something when you become like a truly industry-wide game changer from a game design standpoint. Like I said, it would have been so much higher on my list if I would have seen a little bit more of Act 2, and we never even got to Act 3, which is apparently the best part. Like, there's just so much of this game that we didn't even see, that almost by virtue of having experienced so little of it, I had to go lower on my list. But I know when I get there and I finish this game, I'm probably going to look back and think that I'm an idiot, that it's not a top 5 game of all time. Maybe definitely the best game of this year I can see very easily happen with this game. But for now, it's going to go at the 8th spot. And for the love of God, play this game. It is a cultural phenomenon for a reason. I don't really think this needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyways. These rankings aren't necessarily what I think are the best games of this year, but it's more so just my favorite games of the year. How good they are can obviously bump up a game up on my favorite list, but it's not the end all be all. Like last year, for example, God of War Ragnarok was my number 2 game behind Pokemon Legends Arceus. I think if I had to look at it objectively, God of War Ragnarok is a better game than Pokemon Legends Arceus, but it didn't mean that Legends Arceus wasn't my favorite game of the year. I love my number 7 game on this list because it's a great game, but it's also from an IP that I don't normally care about very much. It's also the style of game that when people look at it, they compare it to the Dark Souls franchise and the Soulsborne from FromSoft, which I also don't really like. I find myself wanting to champion for this game more than any because it launched to a lot of tech problems and really kind of got off to a really bad start. But it's so much more than that Souls-like game that people think it is on the surface. I'm so excited to talk about Jedi Survivor. Earlier this year, like what I did with Alan Wake 1, I played Jedi Fallen Order because I really wanted to play Survivor. Shout out to Grayson as always for being who I knew that played and loved Fallen Order. It made me want to give these a try. Before we get into Survivor, let's talk a bit about Fallen Order. As I said, it was pitched as sort of a lightweight version of a Dark Souls-like game. It was the first time anything close to that formula worked for me, and I had a great time with it. I was excited with the changes coming in Survivor, including new lightsaber stances and easier travel methods to navigate the open world planets. Jedi Survivor was everything I could have wanted in a sequel to a game that I liked just fine. It's now a highly anticipated 3rd game in the series that I'm pretty sure has been confirmed to be in the development now. Everything I thought I needed changed or tweak in the first game was in Survivor. The combat was still challenging, but the enemies were way less spammy with their attacks. I wasn't finding myself almost stuck in endless animations of being attacked like I was in Fallen Order. I felt more in control of Cal, the main character, and felt like combat was still challenging without having some moments that just felt like I got unlucky and died in cheap ways. The story of these games take place in between episodes 3 and 4. Cal was one of the young Jedi who survived Order 66, and he's been on the run ever since, trying to battle back against the Empire when he can, and also just trying to find somewhere he can live in peace without being hunted. This game has a classic get the gang back together sequence, and some classic MacGuffin, we gotta get the special thing to the special place or else all is lost. But the characters are great and it just works. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's just good enough to keep me going. But there were some things that I won't spoil that are genuinely my favorite moments in games this year and in the last few years. If you've played the game, you probably know what boss fight I'm talking about that happens a little bit later in the game, and the actual very ending of the game involves a twist that I'm sure if I was in that headspace of trying to predict it, I would have seen it coming, but I was just kind of free-flowing with this game and letting it happen, so it actually worked for me. And the fight at the end was maybe the most challenging, like, hardest thing in a game I did this year that I like persevered and powered through. Kind of gave me that, what I imagine is that adrenaline rush that Soulsborne people get from playing a Dark Souls or Elden Ring or whatever. It was so awesome. Overall, my biggest point in recommending this game to people comes from the gameplay. This game does have Souls-like combat for sure, but it's also maybe my favorite 3D puzzler platformer I've played in a long time. Cal is so much fun to just navigate through the environment as, chaining together double jumps and dashes and zip lines and swings and wall runs. It all creates such a fun flow state that I never got tired of running down a side path to explore a cave, because I knew I'd probably find a chest with an upgrade to my heals, or an awesome hairstyle or clothing item, and the path there would surely have some satisfying platforming to do on the way, making it all worth it. Jedi Survivor is a sequel that I think is worth playing Fallen Order for, but honestly isn't necessary. Survivor does a good enough job explaining what happened in the first game, while also providing a fun story that doesn't need to have the first third to appreciate this middle third. It sets up a fun concept for the third game, so there's no time like the present to give Jedi Survivor a shot. Also, look at this absolute vibe of a person, and tell me you don't want to play 50 hours of this game. Yeah, I thought you would. In these videos, I've talked a lot about how I have both streamed games this year and also found a new love for an entire new genre in horror games. This game is the highest ranked list on my game that covers both of those categories. I played Resident Evil 4 Remake this year completely on stream, and I know that it's going to be my favorite action horror game that I played for a really long time. My trio of horror games I played this year on stream ends here with RE4 Remake, and I can't say enough great things about this game. Resident Evil is obviously a classic series, but things weren't always as great as they are now with the franchise. Once they started making their remakes and rebooted the series with Village, sky has been the limit for this game. People were concerned, however. Resident Evil 4 holds up so well today. Why do they need to remake this one? I'm so glad they did. The remake got rid of the tank control movement, no more needing to stand in place to shoot zombies. That idea was probably fine back then, but without it being gone, I don't think I would have really tried this game. They also added in a parrying system for knife attacks that make it possible to survive attacks if you can time it correctly, as well as give another resource to manage that feels natural for this game. For having not played the original, from what I've heard, there's really nothing they changed in this remake that's not much better for the game, making this remake truly the new definitive way to play this game. Resident Evil 4 leans more into the action side of action horror, and maybe that's why I liked it the most. It's definitely the least scary of this, Dead Space and Alan Wake 2, but nonetheless, it has some sequences that can still be nerve-wracking and make me tense up. But this game's strengths are in the combat and how endlessly satisfying blasting away Los Blagos dudes can be. It's not nearly as precious with its resources as Dead Space either. I never once had to worry about ammo because the game is smart with what it drops. It knows I'm light on shotgun rounds, so my next crate is probably going to have some of it to get me back to where I need to be. I'd be a fake Resident Evil fan if I didn't talk about the best part of this game, the inventory management. Dredge used a similar system to this as well to store fish, but RE4's inventory management in the suitcase is truly unmatched. It is so satisfying to organize the grid layout in Leon's case and make sure everything is where you want it to be. It really could have been its own game if they wanted it to be. I'm only like 10% joking here, but I'm just going to say that if you purposely use the auto sort function and don't do it on your own, you're kind of a coward, but that's all. For real though, every encounter in this game feels perfectly crafted. Enemies are spawning at spots and intervals that made me really think about who to take down first, whose legs I just need to shoot out for now to let me run past them to a clearing so I could reload, get my bearings, and maybe position myself to make them come down a more narrow hallway or through a door to get me so I can start picking them off. All the guns feel usable, and with the upgrade system being so strong, it's easy to build a loadout that fits your style. Even the currency system in this game is improved through the gem socketing system. Different pieces of treasure have different shaped sockets, and putting in different combos of gem sizes and colors builds up multiplier modifiers to the sell price you can get for those items. Normally escort missions are the worst missions in the game, and this game is one giant escort mission with Leon trying to save the president's daughter, Ashley. But yet again, this game finds a way to make this not that bad. Ashley can either stay close or keep her distance. There are lockers she can hide in to stay safe while Leon deals with threats. Not once did having to watch over Ashley take away from my experience or make me feel something I wouldn't have if it wasn't for Ashley being there. It all just works, and they've kept fun for the players at the forefront in every way. The story is as goofy and over the top as you'd expect from a Resident Evil game, but it just works so well. It's such a combination of horror and action with comedy, and just the right amount of cheesiness. All of that combined just works to turn what was already considered a absolute classic that a lot of people didn't really think needed a remake at all into one of the true best modern gaming experiences you can have. More than Dead Space, more than Alan Wake. If you've never played anything even remotely scary, Resident Evil 4 is the game that I would throw towards anybody. It's so much fun, and I can't wait for them to remake more games. Basically any game that comes out that's a sequel to another game, it already comes in with a built-in expectation that it needs to be bigger and better than that previous game. And it's sometimes hard for games to live up to those expectations. Now, if you take that and then you're also trying to follow up what a lot of people consider the greatest game ever made, and you look at something like Tears of the Kingdom and think, how could they possibly do it? How could they make the best game ever better? And in my opinion, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom did just that, and it's not even close. I don't think I'm going to spend as much time explaining what Tears of the Kingdom is as I have in other games entries on this list. Much like Baldur's Gate 3, it's almost impossible to truly mention all the reasons this game is amazing and everything you can do in it. It's a sequel to Breath of the Wild, and they made even better tools to use while exploring Hyrule, as well as building on what it even means to be in Hyrule. This game introduced so many great tools, but let's start with the biggest one, Ultra Hand. Being able to move things around in free space and sticking two things together like glue sounds so simple, and it is, but that's what makes it so beautiful. It's simple. You can make countless things this way to solve any sort of puzzle, or even just solving how to get from point A to B in the most satisfying way. No other game has ever made me choose the longer way of building something to use to get me around, versus just running and climbing my way there, but getting there quicker. It's like the video game embodiment of the phrase, it's not about the destination, but the joy of the journey. Much like Baldur's Gate 3 and its infinite ways of approaching the game, Tears is the same. Once you've collected a lot of the Zonai devices that are used to create your vehicles, there really are infinite ways to approach the same situation in a way that rewards creativity and experimentation for everyone. Another game changer is Ascend, the best get me out of here ability in a game ever. It's simple. Have a roof over your head? Just teleport up and out the other side. It helps both get out of mistakes you've made, but also adds a level of verticality to puzzles too. Like everything in this game, it has multiple uses that work perfectly with one another. I haven't even mentioned the story yet. I honestly couldn't tell you the story of Breath of the Wild other than Calamity Ganon showed up and it was bad news. I think the story in Tears of the Kingdom is much, much better. The game opens with Zelda and Link finding a mysterious old body that suddenly awakens and attacks. Link tries to fight back, but he has his arm almost burned away and he loses all of his hearts and stamina as a way of getting you back to square one in this game. Zelda then is pulled into a chasm far below Hyrule Castle and the adventure begins. Of course, this mysterious body is Ganondorf, known as the Demon King of legend. Throughout the game, learning where he came from, how he got to what Link and Zelda found him as, and most importantly, what happened to Zelda and where is she? Finding out all of this was a journey that I couldn't stop playing until I got my answers. I lost tons of hours of sleep this year to playing this game and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Along with the main story, each Zelda game also always has a fun story behind how the Master Sword comes into play. It's broken and shattered by the Demon King in the beginning of the game. The story and method of how Link gets the Master Sword back in this game is my favorite story moment in any Zelda game I've ever played. And honestly, the more I start thinking about it, I think it's my favorite Nintendo story piece that I've ever played. It's so cool. There's so much else I can say about this game, and much like the trailers leading up to the release of this game, I'm burying the lead here. Not only do you have all of Hyrule to explore, and the Sky Islands they showed in trailers, there's also the depths, an underground area that is literally just as big as the map of Hyrule, underground in complete darkness. It sounds scary, and honestly, it kind of is. It's a whole other world down the depths. Monsters are tougher, being hurt by them takes hearts away and can't be healed back without being in the light or cooking with a specific ingredient. It's like its own survival mode down there, and it's insane. The best part about the depths is something I'm never going to spoil for you guys, but just when you play it, just think about the depths and its connection to everything else. It's very mysterious just because it's absolute darkness, like you don't know what's down there. But how it relates to the rest of Hyrule was like this big aha moment that, like, ironically in a place of total darkness was like a light bulb just went off. That once I realized that, I was just blown away even more than I was already with this game. A lot of what makes this game great is the same as Breath of the Wild too. The world is so real and lived in, the side quests are so rewarding, exploration and discoveries are impossible to avoid, and the game does such a great job of letting your will to explore and discover be what leads you to the content available in the game. See a cave up on a mountainside? There is always going to be something in there worth checking out, and it makes every second of this game, even ones where you aren't doing anything, feel worthwhile. I also wanted to shout out the final boss encounter / sequence of this game. Slight spoilers on the format of the first half of this sequence, but I'll leave the back half a mystery. Having a one-on-one sword fight with Ganon is the best way to fight him in my opinion. It's so close and personal and just lets you feel how powerful Ganon can be, but also how skilled Link / you have become in the game to be able to defeat someone like that. It's fantastic and was a much better ending than Breath of the Wild. I debated having this game higher on my list than it is here at 5. It feels wrong having it only at 5. That's kind of the year it's been. This game is an absolute masterpiece, a bona fide classic just like Breath of the Wild. If you somehow are one of the people out there that enjoys video games and is watching this video that hasn't played Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, I implore you, play Breath of the Wild first. It's an awesome game. It's a masterpiece in its own right, but I don't think I would like Breath of the Wild if I played Tears of the Kingdom and then went back to Breath of the Wild. Play Breath of the Wild first. You'll love it and appreciate it, and then you'll just have an even bigger appreciation for what Tears of the Kingdom did to go from that perfect game to an objectively better game, in my opinion. I can't think of anything that's better in Breath of the Wild than in Tears of the Kingdom.
Link, you must find me.
There's a lot of spots in my countdown here that the games that are right next to each other was really a coin toss. It was so close, like which one would go over the other one. Like honestly, if I could go back, I would probably put Dredge above Cocoon. They were very close in my mind. Tears of the Kingdom and what is my number 4 game is the hardest one of those choices I've had. Whenever two games are so close, I end up having like a default tiebreaker in my head that is, which of those two games is more surprising that I like it that much? Like Tears of the Kingdom, for example, that's a new Zelda game. I'm gonna love a Zelda game. And to be fair, for this game, I did absolutely adore the first 2 games in this series, but in general as a concept and as an IP, similar to Star Wars with Jedi Survivor, I don't like Marvel anything really. So the fact that I am obsessed with Spider-Man and the Spider-Man games, more so than anything else in Marvel, Spider-Man 2 ended up winning that tiebreaker with Tears of the Kingdom. I played the first game as well as Miles Morales for videos on this channel as the first games I played on my PS5 for content, and I was hooked right away. Traversing New York, combat, clearing off the side activities and collectibles, all that made it one of my favorite open world series of all time. Every part of this series, including the story in my opinion, have never been better as they are in Spider-Man 2. Let's start with the biggest strength of this game, traversal. I went back to play the first game to do some DLC after starting this game, and it's amazing how much the first game now feels like it's just a bare bones version of web swinging, even though on its own, it's still great. They just made it so extraordinary in this game that it's truly one of the most fun movement systems in any game ever made. Not only do you have web swinging, but they also added in a web suit to basically turn into Superman and soar through the air, hitting wind tunnels for extra speed. They also added in dashes and giant leaps, slingshotting off the ground to get started, quick turns around corners to change directions without missing a beat. It's truly incredible, and I could watch people just flying around New York City listening to some chill music for hours. Combat has also been simplified in this game, but in a good way. Gone is the gadget wheel, and it's been replaced with just cooldowns on the face buttons. Spider powers mapped to L1 and gadgets mapped to R1. It's much simpler to know what you have available to use without needing to pause the action to look at a list of consumables in a wheel. It all flows so seamlessly and keeps you in the action longer. They also made the street crimes nothing more than an optional activity to get some extra XP and currency versus being needed to get to 100% completion. The worst part of Spider-Man 1 was that grind of doing at least 5 of every type of crime in every single zone that just really added a lot of fluff to that game that really wasn't needed. They've completely stripped that down and gone with the quality over quantity method, and I'm always going to be on board for that in a game. My personal favorite part of this game, the story. The story of the first 2 games, more so in the first Spider-Man over Miles Morales, is incredible. It might be the performances of the voice actors in this one that really sends it over the top for me. But something about it had me absolutely needing to see what was going to happen next. I know there's a lot of Venom fatigue, but one of the perks of not being a massive comic book / MCU fan is that I really haven't seen many of the things with Venom in it, so to me, he's still a fun and terrifying Spider-Man villain, and in my opinion is the villain I think of with Spider-Man. I love that Insomniac added in the twist of, and I guess slight spoiler here, but Harry being who is Venom was a really cool and fun twist that just added to how much I felt for the characters and the struggles they were going through in this game. Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero, and these games are a huge reason why. I know a lot of superheroes try to live normal lives while secretly being a hero. Something about Spider-Man, both Peter and Miles, just do it in a way where you really feel for them. They want so badly to make a difference in their community, and the struggles they both have while trying to balance either adult life with a job and a mortgage and girlfriend for Peter, or being a kid in high school trying to get into college and also have a social life, including with the girl he likes, for Miles. They do such a great job in this game with the writing and performances of making you want things to work out for Pete and Miles. I was constantly rooting for Peter and MJ to figure things out and try to save Harry along the way. By the end of the game, I was literally demanding that Miles and Haley get together, and if that wouldn't have happened, I might have rioted. Along with the main story, I think this game is going to live on for me as an all-time great open world game, and how satisfying and streamlined it is to 100% do everything. The side activities in this game are so perfectly crafted. All of them not only have fun gameplay elements that feel almost like mini-games at times, but they all have a really cool and interesting story to them that helps flesh out the world or give more context to certain characters and their motivations, or just show how much the communities really love and appreciate what the Spider-Man do for them. Plus, they dole out the content to you gradually, and the side stuff actually relates to what just happened in the main story in some way. So it's like it was designed for me and how I like to play open world games. Do a main mission, and not move on to another main mission until I have done all the side missions available. I really felt at home playing this game. Spider-Man 2 to some people is almost too predictable to be super high on their list, and to me that's honestly not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with being really good at what you do, and Insomniac has been perfecting these games over the last 6 years, and the outcome ended up being my favorite Marvel anything in Spider-Man 2. I love this game. It is time for the top 3. We are here finally. I'm honestly probably the most excited to talk about my number 3 on this list over any other game here. I can't really call it a hidden gem anymore because it did thankfully end up winning Best Indie at the Game Awards, but I need you all to know and love Sea of Stars like I do. Sea of Stars is in short a love letter to the JRPGs of the SNES era of games, Chrono Trigger specifically. I haven't even played that game, which I know is a cardinal sin as a gamer. But honestly, Sea of Stars is what will make me actually make the time to play that game. It's also the one on my list that I have played through PlayStation Plus Premium, but didn't have to pay extra for it. But they're doing a physical release of the game in early 2024, and I absolutely will be buying that to show love to these devs. This game is about a world where people who are born on a solstice, winter or summer, are special. They are taken to Moon Cradle Village, where they will be trained to be solstice warriors, as they are blessed with the power of the sun or moon, depending on which solstice they are born on. Sea of Stars follows the journey of Valeri, who I definitely called Valerie the whole time I played this game, a lunar warrior, and Zale, a solar warrior, and their best friend Garl, who is just a normal kid. I won't dig into too many details of the full world and lore. Solstice warriors are rare in the present day because of a huge battle that took place in the past, where most Solstice warriors lost their lives to save the world from evil. It probably sounds a little basic, and on the surface it very much is. But these types of plots just work for this game, and it actually goes some places that genuinely move me to the point of tears. It also had some fun twists and epic moments. The story on the surface is a little cookie cutter, but the more you put into it, the stronger it gets. Let's talk about the combat. I mentioned earlier that Super Mario RPG was a huge inspiration for the combat of a game later on that list, and that game is Sea of Stars. Between Mario and Chrono Trigger, so much of this game is classic mechanics executed to perfection. Timing your attacks and defending to do extra damage, as well as taking less damage, makes what could be simple turn-based combat into very engaging and thrilling combat every single time. My favorite part is how you need to defend yourself against big enemy attacks. Sometimes enemies will show that in, say, 3 turns, they're going to use a special attack against you, and they will have a set of symbols next to the countdown timer. Those symbols correspond to symbols that match your attacks of your party. Those enemies need to be hit by attacks that include all of the symbols next to the countdown before it hits 0. And if you pull it off, they don't do the attack at all. This ends up making defense fun because you need to do everything you can to stop these attacks. But also on offense, it helps you game plan your moves. You're never just spamming the same attack because it does the most damage. You need to mix things up and swap out party members to make sure you cover these attacks if you're going to win the tougher fights in this game. It's so good. You also, the more damage you do, build up like a combo meter that, depending on who is active in your party and different combinations of party members, can do different things that are like one big monstrous attack on one enemy, be a big AoE that damages all enemies on the field. It could heal your party, all sorts of stuff like that. Just every little aspect of this game, every button you press in combat, builds it all into my favorite turn-based combat of anything I've ever played in my entire life. The art style in this game is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. It's a perfect representation of what the SNES games felt like they looked like at the time, but the actually beautiful versions. There are so many intricate environments that also have a beautiful day and night version, including sunrises and sunsets too. There are so many different environments. From a mountainside village, to a mining town, cloud areas up in the heavens, to pirate towns, to spooky haunted woods, to clock towers with gears everywhere, to cyber robotic places. Every single environment is oozing with charm and feels so unique to the other areas. These environments and the combat are both made infinitely better by the music in this game. We have now hit the really good shit about this game. I'm not one to really listen to music from a game outside of playing it. I got my wife Tiff the Mass Effect music on vinyl, and we listen to that while we play board games. Outer Wilds, Hades, and Animal Crossing are the other music from games I will listen to while working. I have been listening to the soundtrack of Sea of Stars for the entire time I've been writing these scripts for these Game of the Year videos. It's just so perfect inside the game and out. In the game, it just adds to the great vibes of roaming around the world. The serene areas have bubbly, happy sounds. Battle music is intense and gets me hyped every time. Scary areas have very ominous and foreboding music. Everything is paired with the perfect music, all in the SNES style that both feels vintage and incredibly modern. If I had to pick like an all-time favorite music of any game, I'll probably still go with Animal Crossing because I've loved that since I was in grade school. So nostalgia plays a huge part in that. But right behind that, like 1A and 1B, 1B is Sea of Stars. I am obsessed with this soundtrack. And it's all on Spotify and Apple Music. There's like 8 hours of this music out there. It's so good. Download it, listen to it, put it on the background when you're doing something else. It's so good. I gave some basics of the story earlier, but to dig into those more here, the characters in this game are really what carry it forward for me. Every single character in your party has such a cool and unique story. If anything, maybe the least of which is the actual main characters in Valeria and Zale. I can't even talk about who all the others are besides Garl, because it's a surprise when they get added to the party. And sometimes even who they are at all is a spoiler. Garl we will come back to though later. He deserves his own time in the spotlight. Retro RPGs always have a ton of side systems and content to pursue, and Sea of Stars is no different. There are collectibles and chests to find everywhere. There's a fishing minigame. There's a town to rebuild and find plans for new buildings to add to your home base. There's a traveling storyteller that you can give them items and they'll tell you stories of different people or places in the world for tons of extra backstory and lore. There's a battle game to play in the tavern, so that's like a board game you can play against people. There's a live band you can find music sheets in the world and give to them to change what music is playing in the taverns. There is a hidden trivia quiz show that quizzes you on different characters and story beats and combat rules. There is just so much stuff here that all is somehow so good and rewarding to discover. Alright Garl, it's time. Garl is the perfect human. In a dark world with rising evil force and considering everything he went through in his childhood, he is the purest of souls who wants nothing but to cook good food for his friends and is willing to protect those around him. Without spoiling how, Garl ends up being so integral to the story of this game while also being the best character and even is dominant in combat by being both bulky and tanky but also healing the party. I wanted to give him his own little special shout out here because he truly is so incredible, but it's hard because I can't fully explain why he's so good. Like story-wise, I can't mention it, but just who he is as a character, it's just pure joy and innocence, and like what friendship is. Like I could get like really fucking out there with this, but he's just so perfect, and I hope I've done a good enough job explaining why and make you want to try this game out. The last thing I'll say about Sea of Stars is, much like games of old, you have your ending when the credits roll. I absolutely think you need to keep playing beyond that point. There's so much more to the story that it impresses that both the first ending and the later true ending can both ultimately be fine places to stop. I am so happy I was in love with this game so much to keep going and play more to see what else it has to offer. It's truly mind-blowing what they have in store for you after the credits, and I urge everyone who plays this game to see it through. And worst case, look it up if you're not going to play it. Sea of Stars is honestly kind of in the same vein as Dead Space for me. It opened my eyes to an entire new genre of games that I love in theory, but I haven't really dabbled in old JRPGs. I want to go back and kind of take a history lesson of all the classics now, and that is 100% because of how much I loved Sea of Stars. It's honestly the game, while I'm writing all this stuff down, I want to screw all these videos. I just want to play Sea of Stars again. It's that game for me this year that I just want to keep playing, but I've forced myself not to for the sake of playing other games. So do what I can't and go play Sea of Stars right now. Much like last year with Pokemon Legends Arceus, there is a game that came out this year that was something that I've been waiting for my entire life to exist. And not only does it exist now, but it actually is amazing too. I have always wanted a great Harry Potter game, and Hogwarts Legacy gave us Harry Potter fans exactly that. My wife Tiff is usually good for a few games a year that she gets excited about playing, and this was the first one this year in February. Games get a bump in my rankings if they're games that both her and I love, because we end up playing all of it side by side together. Getting to share my favorite hobby with her is so important to me, especially when it also crosses over with our love of Harry Potter. Let's get into some of the details of the game itself. What is Hogwarts Legacy? In short, it's an open world Harry Potter game that takes place 100 years before Harry ever shows up to school. You play as a new 5th year student who has suddenly become able to control a mysterious type of magic. Throughout the game, you get caught up on your studies by going to class, interacting with your fellow students, and learning more about this dark mystery of where this power is coming from, and most importantly, who wants to use this power for evil and why. It's really a classic open world game. You have main missions, side missions, overworld activities that are icons on the map that you need to clear off. At its core, it's really that Ubisoft formula of open world games, but for some reason this game specifically, it just works really, really well. I can see myself having so much to say about this game, so let's take it one piece at a time, starting with the environment you get to play in. The game takes place at Hogwarts, of course, but also on the grounds, surrounding lands, the Forbidden Forest, and even Hogsmeade Village. The first time you walk around Hogwarts genuinely took my breath away. The common rooms are what I want to highlight the most inside the castle. Being a proud Hufflepuff and my wife a proud Ravenclaw, we were so thrilled to see how detailed and full of charm the common rooms were. I honestly wish you had more reasons to be in your common room. You pick up some quests from fellow housemates there, and there are a few items you need to go back for, but it's still gorgeous and makes me want to walk through it, not run, every time I'm there. It's just so well realized, and you can tell the folks at Avalanche Studio are a group of Harry Potter nerds who have also been in love with the franchise since it started. I mentioned how I've been waiting my entire life for like a Harry Potter game like this. I think a huge part of that and why other games have failed is when it comes to massive IPs like that have such rabid fan bases, like your Star Warses, your Marvels, your Disney and stuff like that. Real fans want it to feel as genuine and possible, and we will see through like any sort of corporate bullshit that like doesn't truly understand. So this game, you can just tell, is a Harry Potter game made by fans for the fans, and it's just a huge part of why it works so well. The beautiful looks don't stop once you leave the castle though. The rolling hills, the small villages around the world, the Forbidden Forest and Hogsmeade Village are all incredible to explore as well. Some games just nail making indoor areas feel so real and lived in and full of things that make them feel like actual places. Hogwarts Legacy excels in that, and that's all perfect for a Harry Potter world. To take something we all know so well like Hogwarts, and take it 100 years in the past but still make it believable and like somewhere you've always known is so impressive to me. Navigating this world is a blast too, especially once you get access to your broom and even mounts. Exploring every nook and cranny is so rewarding and has tons of collectibles and activities to do, but we will cover those later. The story also sends you through one full year, so all the seasonal changes to the school and environment look so stunning and add to the great vibes. The next thing I want to talk about is the combat, and to do so we have to start with the classes. In Hogwarts Legacy, the way you unlock more spells involves going to different classes and performing certain tasks as your homework to unlock new spells. All of the professors have so much charm and personality. Special shout out to Professor Garlic, how you doing? Keep it moving. The type of spells are broken down by colors, and if someone you are fighting has a yellow shield, for example, you have to hit them with a yellow spell to break that shield before being able to damage them. It's so simple but works really well, especially considering you can fully customize your layouts. and have multiple layouts you can switch to on the fly. Each enemy also has a specific spell that when used at the right time will make them take even more damage. You really have to pay attention to who you're fighting, and for me, it all kept me immersed in being a student at Hogwarts. Mastering how to defeat all the enemy types through their weaknesses was so satisfying every time. For example, when fighting a troll, they will do an overhead smash attack with their club. If you dodge it and then use Flipendo, it smashes them in the face with their own club, doing a ton of damage. Each enemy has a spell like this that both makes sense in the context of what is happening, but is also so fun and satisfying to pull off. You can even pursue a questline that teaches you the unforgivable curses, and it's a choice in the game whether or not you want to be someone who uses these curses. It all adds to the role-playing of living out my dream of being a real wizard in the Harry Potter universe. As an open-world game, it's important to have fun activities to pursue, and Hogwarts Legacy has those in bunches. There are keys you find around Hogwarts that you follow back to a locked cabinet. There are moon statues you can only collect at night that are scattered around the world. Once you unlock the broom, there are speed trials as well as balloons to pop. My favorite are the Merlin trials, different puzzles that have a variety of styles. Even lockpicking with Alohomora was some of my favorite lockpicking in any game. There are puzzles involving animal pictures and numbers to find a secret passcode to open these doors. There's even a portion of the game involving fantastic beasts and capturing them to breed for their resources. All of these activities were so much fun to complete, and I found myself going for 100% completion in this game, even when the trophies for some of these activities don't involve doing all of them. I also want to give a special shout out to the Room of Requirement. I normally don't really care about having a customizable living space, but this one was both really fun to play with while also being extremely useful. Every inch of this place, the walls, ceilings, and floors, can be customized by color and style. You can buy plants for extra furniture to help flesh it out too. But the big part is you can make planter stations as well as potion stations to grow your own ingredients and make your own potions. Keeping these stocked up makes it worth stopping by, which lets you see the cool rooms you design more often. You can also make portals to different environments to keep the beasts that you have captured, to harvest feathers or furs or other beast parts you can sell. I know a lot of people probably got more obsessed than I did, but I did really enjoy my time playing around with this. Now for the story. Both the main, but especially the side stories, all felt so fun to experience. The main story leads you to a mystery of who wants this ancient power and what their motives are for trying to harvest it. There are certain students at school you befriend who help you in your investigation who also have their own struggles. Out of all these students you meet, I want to give a special shout out to Sebastian Solo's questline from Slytherin. His is by far the most interesting. He's the most in-depth character, I feel like, the most layered character, and just it's so heartbreaking what he's trying to do to help his sister is like the non-spoilery version of what's going on there, that he deserves a shout out. As much as I enjoyed the main story, it's the side content that makes open world games special, and especially what makes a Harry Potter game feel like what we have all been waiting for. All the little side adventures you can do with other classmates and helping them pursue different interests they have are what I got lost in the most with this game. There's even a section of the game a few hours in that is actually different depending on what house you're in. It unfortunately is what kept me from pursuing the Platinum Trophy in this game. You have to get to that point with a character in each house, and it's a solid 5 to 6 hours into the game until this mission happens. But it's very cool that they did something like this to make it unique to your house. I didn't write this in my script, but as I was going through this part, you can actually hook up your Pottermore account to have it, like I already knew I was a Hufflepuff, I did that, it automatically put me into Hufflepuff, but you can also just let it do a random sorting ceremony thing. So it's really cool that you can that has that Pottermore account connectivity to the game too. It's really cool. The last aspect of this game that I want to talk about is my favorite part, playing it with Tiff. I know I mentioned earlier that games get moved up my rankings when it's something we can play together, but I really can't stress enough how much fun February of 2023 was with just obsessing over and constantly playing Hogwarts Legacy with Tiff. Games can be great for so many reasons, and much like Arceus last year, this game gave me an experience I have wanted for my entire life, and I got to have it with my favorite person. It's sappy, but it's true. I love this game so thoroughly, and I'm so thankful that it exists. I'm not entirely sure if the numbers are in yet because it's only January 7th as I record this, but I know going into late 2023, Hogwarts Legacy was shaping out to be the first game since I believe 2008 to be the best-selling game in any calendar year that wasn't a Call of Duty or a Rockstar-made game, which is so impressive. Avalanche is almost assuredly working on a Hogwarts Legacy 2 at this point, if that's what it's going to be called. Whatever the next Harry Potter game is, I know they're working on it, and honestly, fingers crossed, some co-op and maybe some Quidditch in this next one. That would be amazing. If you like Harry Potter and video games at all, I probably don't need to tell you to play this game because you've already played it. Apparently over 10 million of us did that this year. I think it was 15 million actually, now that I'm thinking about it. This video game gave me that same feeling that reading the books for the first time had, watching the movies for the first time. Like, it is just such a core part of Harry Potter that honestly, it's like Hogwarts Legacy is so much better than what Fantastic Beasts could have been. Like, this is the true follow-up to the original stuff that we've been waiting for, but I just can't say enough great things about Hogwarts Legacy. Please go give it a try.
We leave our legacy in your hands.
"2023 is going to be remembered as one of the best and unfortunately worst years in the history of video games. It's the best because, for my money, as far as releases go, I would put 2023 up against any other year for anybody else. I think 2023 is a deep enough year that it is the top best year we've ever had. But unfortunately, all that great success has somehow also came with thousands of jobs being lost in the video game industry. That is just kind of baffling to think about when it's video games are doing better than they ever have, both from a quality and financial standpoint. Games make more money than they ever had, and they're still losing jobs. It just sucks. And in a year that's been this good for the games, I think it's really important to think about for a second who's responsible for making those games exist, and just hoping that something gets better going forward. Now, number one. What is the number one game and what I just said is the best year of gaming of all time? It's been at the top spot for me for months now, for I think 5 or 6 months, honestly. A couple games almost took the throne from it. I considered it, at some point I considered Baldur's Gate 3, Tears of the Kingdom, and Hogwarts Legacy. All at one point was like, are they my favorite game? But none of them could take him down. None of them could take the number one spot down. They are still standing strong. What's crazy is I almost didn't even play this game right away. I was gonna buy it and be like, I'll come back to that later. But I bought it and I decided, you know what? I hear the demo and the first few hours is very good. I'm gonna stream the opening hours on launch night. That'll be good for the channel. Boy, those opening hours, incredible, made me change everything. I ended up no-lifing this game, dumping 80 hours in to get to 100% complete. I'm so glad that I did. Final Fantasy 16 kind of came out of nowhere for me in a way that I just cannot believe that this game gave me both some of the best emotional payoffs I've ever had in a game, while also coming with some of the most epic, jaw-dropping, spectacular set-piece moments that I've ever seen, all crammed into one in a game I didn't even expect to love this much. So let's get into it. Let's start by talking about that demo. The demo takes you through the opening hours of the game, where you get sort of an origin story for our main character, Clive Rossfield. When this game was in its preview window, people said it was like if Final Fantasy met Game of Thrones, and they were so right. It's got political intrigue with people of rivaling nations, family drama, backstabbing, and some absolute gut-wrenching moments. And that's just in the first 3 hours of the game. It does such a great job showing off what makes this game great. You get to feel for the characters, get to know Clive and how he thinks and feels about his surroundings and his situation with his family. You learn about some of the dynamics of the Rossfield family and their leadership over the Kingdom of Rosaria. If you have any interest in this game at all, play this demo at least to see this brilliant opening sequence. The story overall is one that a lot of people have poked holes in, but I truly loved all of it. It follows Clive through his life after the events of the opening sequence that I won't spoil, and he ends up being found by a man named Cid. Cid is a staple of the Final Fantasy games, and this iteration of him might be my favorite one yet. Cid is the leader of a rebellion of sorts, and he wants to destroy the Mother Crystals, the source of all magic in the world. People rely on this magic to live, but using that magic is also slowly destroying the world. There are also people who are born with innate magical abilities that are called bearers. They are enslaved and treated as less than human in the world of Valistia. Along with destroying these crystals, they want to free bearers from their lives of slavery and give them a life of choice, being able to do what they want versus being stuck in their terrible situations where their magic is used until it literally kills them. It's sometimes a little clunky when addressing a topic as heavy as slavery, but seeing how different people react to people who are or aren't bearers, or who carry the bearer's mark like Clive does, is really interesting, and all of the voice work in this game is better than any Final Fantasy game before. With a big world with tons of characters and nations to keep track, they created a system called active time lore in this game, and it was a huge game changer. During any cutscene, you could stop the game and active time lore would provide sections to hover over to get a breakdown of every person, location, country, and organization that is involved with or mentioned during that cutscene that show you information about them. They even change what shows up throughout the game. Like you could hover over Clive in the beginning of the game and the end of the game, and it'll tell you very different things. It's catered to where you are in the story, but also how they would interact and relate to the other people or places in the story or in the scene. So if two different nations are mentioned on screen, they would give their breakdown of who they are, but they would also mention how they relate particularly to the other one. So it's not just like the same info dump to read over and over again. It gives you the context of what's happening and what you're supposed to be thinking about, which in a game like this can really help at the very beginning. A huge part of the story and world is how the traditional summons are implemented in this game. Instead of the summons being called upon, certain people are blessed with the powers of a certain icon, which are what the summons are called. Each kingdom has a particular icon that they control. The Rossfields had the power of the Phoenix, which should have been given to Clive, but somehow it passed over him and went to his younger brother Joshua instead. Whoever the icons are fully transform into the icons, aka summons. These icons end up being very crucial to the story and are responsible for the most epic moments I have ever seen in a game. These icon battles turned Final Fantasy 16 into a Godzilla game, where you get to play out these massive cinematic kaiju-like battles. These set pieces left my jaw on the floor every single time. Special shoutouts to the Titan and Bahamut battles specifically. These are both my number 1 and number 2 fights in any game I've ever played. They're so incredible because of how cool they are, but also what really sets them apart is the why these fights are happening, especially with Bahamut. That makes them so unforgettable. Sometimes these fights, no lie, last 30 minutes, which seems impossible. Like, how could that ever still be good? But like, not are they that long, they're still satisfying. They look amazing the whole time, and you don't want them to end after 30 minutes of the same fight. That seems impossible, but Final Fantasy 16 does it every single time. 16 isn't the first Final Fantasy game to ditch the turn-based combat of old, but this one is probably the most straightforward action game in the series. You have companions in a party, but you only ever control yourself and your trusty wolf, Torgal. Some people didn't like this, but I really enjoyed being able to just focus on my build as Clive and let everyone else just fight for themselves. With the game so centered around Clive and his story, it makes sense for this game to be much more of a solo adventure than building a party like other Final Fantasy games. The combat itself is very simple yet deep. You have just your basic attacks, then R2 plus a face button for cooldowns, with eventually 3 loadouts to cycle through on the fly. Mixing and matching the different abilities that all work well together is a fun mechanic. I loved building different layouts that were better for large groups of enemies or boss fight builds that were more single target focused. Each icon has abilities that Clive can master that all have a certain look to them, that when all of them get used in the battle, the particle effects were breathtaking. I think that's a good summary of why I love this game so much. Over my 80 hours with it, so much of it was just a spectacle, whether it was the giant massive kaiju battles of icons fighting each other or just the actual combat as Clive, with just all these colors and whips and slashes and magic flying all over the place. Like, it all just looked insane to behold. I loved every second of it. Final Fantasy 16 is what is now being called an open zone game, where it's a game with smaller sections that are like mini open worlds, and I prefer that over one giant map. It was nice having it segmented to help it be more approachable in my opinion. There aren't really any icons to go and explore. It's just main and side quests that will send you all over the map to explore everything. But I was more interested in the story of what was happening, so I'm glad there wasn't as much fluff in this game. Hogwarts, I loved them because it added to the world, but I felt like I got enough of that from just the story here and it wasn't really needed. There are a lot of things about this game that I love that I can't talk about because they're story moments or some of the jaw-dropping moments that I wouldn't want to spoil how amazing they are. Something I can talk about though is the voice work, specifically for Clive and Cid. It is no secret if you've known me since June when this game came out, but I have a giant man crush on Clive's voice actor, Ben Starr. He has been absolutely crushing it in the video game space this year and has become a beloved celebrity. He does so much great work for so many outlets, and him being so awesome and funny outside of the game genuinely makes me love this game more, knowing such cool people were involved in making it. I don't want to take away from his performance though. He absolutely owns this role, and you can tell that he lived and breathed Clive Rossfield. He's a massive Final Fantasy fan, and he wanted to do right by the series and this character, and he nails it. Ralph Ennison is also brilliant as Cid in this game, both as a charming leader of the revolution, but also as a mentor to Clive. Clive wouldn't have been able to get to where he is at the end of the game without the wisdom Cid gives him to get there. Ralph also had a really prominent character in Diablo 4, so my June was just filled with hearing that incredibly deep voice of Ralph's, and he was so good at both games. A special shout out to some other great characters too. Gav is sort of the right-hand man of Clive, who has a wonderful source of comic relief in this game. Dion was my favorite of all the other icons. He felt like a Jaime Lannister to make a Game of Thrones comparison. Troubled golden boy son of the Emperor who struggled with some inner demons, and his determination to do good by his people, trying to do what's right, and what to do when those can't be done at the same time. Clive's brother Joshua does so much with how little he is around that makes him so memorable, and that bond Clive has with his little brother has made me think of my younger brother Brandon and how, especially growing up, I would have been willing to do anything to stick up for him and make sure he was safe. So many of these characters are written in ways that make them feel so real and believable. In a Final Fantasy game, that's not always the case with how extreme and out there they can be, but this one is different. I mentioned earlier that people have said that this game is like Game of Thrones, and I really think those comparisons are why it landed so well for me. I loved Game of Thrones, until they ruined the ending. But the massive scale of the world, with all the moving pieces and political intrigue, made it all so interesting. With these massive, amazing action pieces in between this great world building that really had me hooked on this game. This is the first Final Fantasy game I have actually finished, and I'm very proud to say that my first one was 16. I know to some people that my number one game of 2023 being Final Fantasy 16 is going to be kind of a hot take, maybe even hotter than what Legends Arceus was, but I can't help it. I love what I love. All I can do is just be honest with myself, and the more I looked at it, the more I kept coming back to this game and my memories of those different story pieces, the action pieces, and how much it was a combination of like some of the most, like I said in the beginning, emotional moments I've ever seen in a game, with like just gripping incredible voice acting that for a Final Fantasy game especially, for some reason just made it even more surprising, while also having just like the biggest, baddest set pieces I've ever seen that rival a God of War or a Horizon, and like just like a massive spectacle on the screen. To me, being compared with Horizon and God of War is about as good of a compliment as I can give a game. Final Fantasy 16 is yet another game on this list that I feel like is a must own, especially for PS5 users since it's an exclusive right now. No PC port is coming soon, but I'm just so thankful I got to play such a big and awesome game that I was excited for going into it, but it still ultimately shocked me for how much I really loved it.
Awaken, child of fate. Awaken, Ifrit.
Oh boy, that is it. We have finally got through my entire Game of the Year list, and it is an incredible list, if I do say so myself. My script, without counting all the improv I was doing and some of my looking at the camera stuff, 17,935 words I wrote for this. On my Google Doc, it is 27 pages long of text of me just gushing about games I love this year. So I would love to know in the comments, do you agree with my list? What was your favorite game of 2023? Do you agree that it's the best year of gaming ever? And if not, what year would you put up there? I know 2007 is kind of a close second with 2023 for a lot of people. Let me know, what were your favorite moments of 2023 and what are you looking forward to in 2024? I know a lot of people think it's going to be a light year, but people say that there's always going to be stuff to play. There'll be some surprise games out there. There'll be some Cocoons, some Sea of Stars, games like that no one Dredge, Dave the Diver. I know I didn't play that, but that was a huge indie darling. There's games that come out of nowhere every year, and I know that'll happen in 2024 as well. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this journey to go through my games. This is my favorite type of content to make every year, where I count down my games, building my list throughout the year. It means a lot to me to have any of you guys watch this stuff and care at all what I have to say about games. Thank you so much, and until 2024, listen to my dad, and I'll see you in the next video.